Welcome to Season 6 of Purposeful Empathy, a show dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who believe the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Today's episode is brought to you by Grand Huron International, an on-demand coaching provider for individuals and companies. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the show. So, welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today, I'm joined by Gunn Jr., who is the founder and CEO of KUOG Corporation and author of the best-selling book, Succeed the Right Way, What Every Compassionate Business Person Must Know. Paul has built a successful career in procurement, logistics, and supply chain management with flawless delivery performance records. According to his company's website, purpose is at the heart and drives everything we do. And he says, we exercise all the domains of empathy in our business model as our North Star. Finally, a quote that Paul holds dear is, you have not lived today until you have done something for someone who can never repay you. And that's attributed to John Bunyan. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Well, thanks, Anita. Thanks for having me.
I'm trying to figure out, how did we even connect? Do you remember?
It was interesting. I think that was a response to a post from one of the articles on empathy for 2022 that got put on LinkedIn. And from there, we meshed and having like-minded ideas. And from there, it snowballed.
That's right. And that's when I found out you lived in Montreal for some time. So anyways, yes, kindred spirits for sure. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And I should say happy Black History Month to start. We're taping this in February. So you believe empathy is really important. Why?
I feel like it's the foundation for communication. Yes, there's a vast majority of people who may not believe in the concept or see it as a valid point. So if you tend to run into someone like that, let's say they love to hear themselves talk. Most people have something to say or want to be heard. They just may show themselves to be the person that wants the light shone on them. If you have empathy or understand this is the type of person you're dealing with, you aren't going to take that personally, but you're going to seek to understand, okay, this is a person who obviously wants to talk about themselves. What can I learn? And then listen and help them understand where you're coming from, but also let them understand that you're caring for their situation as well. So other people may be taken back by a person like that, but someone with empathy may see them for who they are, and they just fuse over or warm over that conversation and can develop that relationship.
Absolutely. And, I'm going to ask from your own personal life. You just told me as we were doing our little pre-chit chat that you're 6'6", and somebody of that stature might not automatically be assumed to be like empathic, right? And there's all these kind of like biases about what an empathic person how they show up in the world. But you say that empathy has actually helped you succeed. So how has that been the case?
So it would be naive to say that there's not bias in the world. So there's usually a preconceived notion when someone meets me. You either played sports or you're not educated. And I'm just speaking frank how it is. Usually it will go. It's not always the case, but that's usually the icebreaker conversation. So most of the times I understand that somebody's trying to break the ice, and then it allows me to have a deeper conversation with it. So it could be taken the wrong way because sometimes it is said in a condescending way. But for the most part, when you show yourself approachable and welcoming, it opens up the other person. So in that case, it does help in terms of the stature, but I think what's made my connections with other people be fruitful is that I've been an open, welcoming person wanting to hear. So that's often overlooked, the size of me versus being able to hear and communicate.
So do you actually think that your height has played a role in how you value empathy? Maybe if you feel like people have felt intimidated by your height, that you've tried on purpose to be, more open and welcoming? Do you think that that's the case? Or were you just generally a warm, kind, empathic guy, and the height has nothing to do with it.
I feel that a lot of that is my personality. It's from young as I can remember. I've generally been this way. I think more anything, the hype may have garnered the attention, but I don't think necessarily that played too much of a role in it, other than when those conversations have turned south in terms of somebody being really condescending and then still treating them, okay, yeah, I understand that's how you may feel, but showing that empathy and kindness, that has turned the conversation in my favor, because then they have felt, I guess, lesser for coming at me like that. And then a relationship has formed. It hasn't always been the case, but it's taught me more so to be calm in many situations. And from there, relationships have fostered.
Yeah, I just watched quickly a clip between Jay Shetty and Will Smith talking precisely about this idea of responding with loving kindness, that we have our egos and our lived experiences might make us want to react in a way where we're sort of like, angry back, but it's actually super disarming to react with loving kindness. And then it almost opens up an opportunity for the other person to shift gears as well.
You never know what somebody's going through. It can be a really serious situation. So you want to kind of meet people where they are. Now, if they continue to show that, then that may be a different story. But everybody has bad days. There could be something that triggers. You don't know. Somebody's kid's in a hospital on their death, and they just don't know how to cope. Somebody may have just lost a parent, and a simple hello or just a warm words may be everything that needs to change that situation. It's not always easy. It's difficult. Most people want to talk, but sometimes that pause to hear somebody else, it matters. It matters.
Yeah, so let's talk about you at work, okay, and the leadership style that you have. You're a serial entrepreneur with a successful track record of scaling businesses that move fast, right? I mean, you're in logistics and management, and all of that has to work at breakneck speed for everything else to kind of happen, right? And you managed to do this. So I'm imagining that's a stressful environment. You're a father as well, so you got a lot going on. You describe your leadership as service leadership. Tell me what that means, and what role empathy plays in that.
So to me, I've heard that notion that, look, if you hire and you build a team knowing that this may not be their ultimate goal in your company. Some may just be working there to get the experience. They want to move on. Others is just to pivot into something else. So while they're there, let them learn what they need to learn. Help improve them to go out and be better leaders and of themselves. It doesn't make sense to necessarily harbor them down, because they're going to choose to leave one way or the other. Why not arm them with the tools? And I think one of the best things to do is to see it in action. Let them learn how to voice their opinions and see what a kind leader can do, and share information and speak when you don't know something, and you can learn from anyone. I think there was that story where the professor at the school had all these management students, and at the end of the semester, he pulls out the white sheet of paper, and they're all thinking that they're going to get the 100 exam question. And he says, no, write the name of the custodian or janitor in front of the two double doors. Nobody could make the name. And he was making the point, how are you guys going to go out and lead these massive corporations, and you don't know the name of the janitor who was a kind man? And the professor was pointing out, if you can't do something simple like this, you got a long road ahead of you if you can't take the simple moments to learn and show those kind acts that matter.
So you obviously have your own value system, and that's what drives you as a leader. But how do you inculcate that in your organizational culture? How do you kind of mentor that? How do you develop that in your people? How do you interview for that kind of, core belief system?
So I look for the character traits. I feel most people can learn if you put them in the right. If there's a desire and thirst for learning, we don't restrict any background or if you haven't come from a top school or boss, it doesn't matter. You're looking for the character trait. To give you an example, there was a student in one of our foreign companies where the hiring manual, I co-owned it with my brother. I said, here, look, take this manual and give it to both candidates. One was college educated, fully ready to come in. The other one was still in school. I said, have him read it. So the one who was college educated said it was beneath me. I'm not going to read it. But everything in that manual was everything you needed to know. It was a short one at that. We wound up hiring the one who was still in college with no experience because she took the time to read the manual. And I said, now you know what it is we do. It wasn't beneath you. And she kept coming back for more questions and more. So that desire, those innate traits you look for, you can't always get it right. But usually if you're looking for those things and say, hey, this person can learn, this one will take an interest in why we do what we do versus saying this doesn't matter. Everything matters.
Again, so, what's interesting about your company and why I was so keen to have this conversation is that you work in a space where you have to be very responsive, very on your game, because it has to do with time frames and supply chain management and logistics that all have to, there's a domino effect that incurs if you make a mistake. And so again, that would seem to me that it would develop this culture of kind of like fast and stressful and but you feel that open communication and empathy is key. There are a lot of people that are finally figuring out that there is a business case for empathy to be made, and it's proving itself, whether people through retention or turnover or mental health issues. You figured this out early. What would you say to the skeptics who still don't believe that empathy actually is not a soft skill? Empathy is a powerful lever for organizational success.
I think they're going to be putting themselves on the outskirts. And to give you an example, I think I read an article maybe a year or two ago where they were talking about sales and revenue teams are now looking for people who have these qualities and these traits to disengage the skeptics, if you will say, who are bottled up emotionally, who are quick charged, because those are usually the people who they're going to win over eventually because they're not thinking and they're not prepared on how to deal with someone who's able to show kindness and empathy and play the long game with them. They're not looking for the immediate sale. They want to come in and build a relationship with you. And for me doing that, I think people and buyers are going to start aligning to purpose if they already have it. And if you have purpose, somebody's going to want to come in because they know what they're doing is impactful. And for me, this is why I've taken what I do so serious. My brother served, my dad served, I have family members who all serve. So when I take an order, I'm thinking of not only the person who's on it, but the family member who has a soldier or war fighter who's out there saying, hey, if I mess this order up, who else on the other end is going to be affected by it? So that may have me go talk to someone in a situation I may not necessarily want to talk to or deal with to understand more, because ultimately it's bigger than me making sure an order gets delivered or placed where it should be.
Today's episode was brought to you by Grand Huron International, an on-demand coaching provider for individuals and companies. So that's interesting because you've just segued into something I wanted to ask you about. It's interesting that you are an empathic leader that believes in service leadership, and yet your company services the U.S. military. So some people, might think, wow, how empathic can he be if he's like servicing the military industrial complex, right? And I had that bias as a younger person. I worked for almost a year on a Canadian Forces base in Germany as a 19-year-old. I kind of had this impression of what soldiers were like and people in the military were like until I worked with them and realized, how sincerely they take their job, how much integrity they have in their role, protecting their citizens and the country they serve. So it sounds to me like the vision you have for your company and the ethos you have is very connected to the mandate of the forces at its sort of highest level. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I feel like some people might say, I'm not sure I believe he's super empathic.
Well, no, that's it. So one, when my brother was over there, that's all I ever thought about. Does he have what he needs? Is he coming home? And I view that for anyone else who has it. Yes, wars are a part of this world. They probably are always going to be. Somebody's going to be in this position, and somebody's going to do it. I felt like up until I had a conversation when we were putting Comcast in our house, the other person on the phone was a former Marine. And when he went on about he was in the unit that we helped retrofit and it saved his life, I already had a passion for it, but it took it to a whole nother level to me. Saying he went on thanking me for 5 minutes. I would not have had my life if it wasn't for y'all helping get that retrofitted. And he just thanked me over and over. And from there on is when I was like, this is bigger than you saying, okay, yes, we're ordering and supporting the military in that, but that's still a person. They may have had no other choice to go into the military to make something for the feds. They may not have wanted to be over there, but they went and they were in something that ultimately saved their life. And to me, it really touched me because I didn't see it as war or soldier. I saw it as a human saying what you did helped in getting home.
Yeah, I really see that when you frame it that way. Absolutely. So on a personal level, given you care so much about purpose, I'm just wondering whether or not you have any routines that allows you to kind of be mindful as a leader, be sharp. I'm just curious to know like your own behavior throughout your day. Like what have you found helps to serve you, serve others?
So one of the things, there was pre-me before kids, and then there's pre-me after kids. So prior to kids, the 4 to 7 a.m., I would wake up, I would have my prayer, I would spend that quiet time making sure I outlined the things I did the night before. So I would always say, okay, what are the big things pressing that I lagged from the day before? So by 7 o'clock, I pretty much had my day figured and outlined, and it was coasting through because those quiet hours in the day, in the morning, were really honed in that flow time. I guess they recognize it. And for me, I would say everyone has their flow cycles. To me, it was that 4 to 7 in the morning. Since kids, that was a little adjustment because that 4 to 7 now is kind of working in dad duty per se, but I've moved around to switch it and spread it out, saying, hey, look, if I can just focus an hour per se and get up and take 5-10 minute breaks and then come back to it, I will address that. But to answer more specifically, I kind of take like a flying V-duck. So I take the most important thing and then I align what things correspond to this important that I can do at almost the same time and knock them down. So I'm cascading the most critical and those things that relate to those most critical at the same time.
Beautiful. That's a little bit of personal development embedded in this conversation about purposeful empathy. Okay, back on track. Thank you for sharing that. 4 to 7 in the morning sounds early to me, but I do believe that those morning hours and that quiet. I'm reading more about digital wellness, right? Because we're all addicted to our phones and we're always in response mode. And just to wake up and not check your phone first, but actually to envision what you want your day to be like and have agency over what your day is going to look like, I think is a really powerful method for success. Go ahead.
I do wake up to get on that and say, look, let me keep my ears attuned to something that may not be the ordinary. So if a vendor calls and they're just not in the normal state, I kind of have my ears up saying, let me pay attention to who may need specific help or addressing that day that I may not feel like being in a position. And if it looks like it's that opportunity, say, yeah, this is the opportunity I'm going to use and I'm going to pour in all the love and kindness per se I can to someone in a business setting. So I'm more so waking up each day looking for who's it going to be today that I can make an impact for and smile on their face.
Well, that's interesting because you make me think of, I had this conversation a few months ago. It recently got posted with Dr. Christian Kiezers. He's a neuroscientist based out of the Netherlands. And he was part of the original team that discovered mirror neurons, right? So, like, we have our neurons fire in our brain the same way when we experience something or when we see somebody experience it, right? So, that's kind of interesting. And he's gone on over the last decade to actually talk a lot about shared circuitry, and that there is something, you use the word attunement or being attuned to your vendors or your clients. And I think that that's fascinating because for me, what I'm picking up subtly is that if you wake up with the intention of being receptive to what their needs are, you're like trying to you're trying to tune in to the channel, their frequency of like what their need is. So you're like trying to get on the shared circuit super highway, if I can put it that way. But that's what comes to mind.
It does, and what's interesting, I would say in some ways, even though I would identify as an empath, I'm also introvert. That can sometimes be difficult because as an introvert, you don't necessarily want to be in a situation interacting with a whole bunch of people. So then it's more me telling myself, all right, well, I'm going to do that and I'm going to override that to the best I can. And when it's in a one-on-one situation, it does make it a little easier when you can kind of pick the phone up or send some kind word via email or request that brightens somebody's day. But yes, you're exactly right.
Well, I know that you were not reluctant, but as an introvert, you said, I don't know about doing this whole podcast thing, but you've been such a treasure. I've really enjoyed our conversation. So our last question, before you get on to your busy day, is I usually ask my guests to share, if they would be willing, a time in their life, could be a big story, could be a little story, doesn't matter, when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
So there was a very pivotal moment in my previous company with my brother where we just won a large contract. And there was no other way for us to service it if it wasn't for the kindness and empathetic leadership of the vendor that we went to. And it was a substantial nine-figure order. We could not handle it. And they brought us in. They were more interested in the character of our company leadership, who was involved. And that's more what they were drilling. And when they finished it, they said, all right, we're going to help you. We're going to extend you to terms. And we would not have been able to service that order. But what that stuck out to me was they had some older leaders in the company that were from that era where if you said you're going to do it, that's all we needed to hear. But we wanted to see face to face. And that really resonated to me because they didn't know us. We were really young at that time, and they showed that kindness. And they have continued success. They're still a great vendor to us today, even in this new company. And that really left a mark on me to show you can run a company and be very successful and have this same method of thinking. And to feel that, I know others, when you extend that way, it does the same thing to them in many cases.
It's not often that I thought that I'd be moved to tears when hearing about corporate America these days, but you're kind of giving this little ray of hope that some people with deep character and empathy, are out there doing great work. And I'm happy that happened for you. And I'm happy now that you are returning the favor and paying it forward.
Yeah, me too. It matters. It matters. I
Well,
think COVID mess is really showing why you need so many people. It's just so many people are dealing with things on a personal level. For you not to take the time to at least understand what's going on personally with somebody or making a mindful act to overlook it is just doing a disservice to yourself and them.
yeah, you just made the case for purposeful empathy. So, Paul, thank you for this time together. I appreciate having met you and heard your thoughts about empathy. And thanks to all the listeners and viewers. We'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy. What if you had access to your own council of coaches to help you break free from your thinking clutter, make that important decision, and liberate you from whatever's holding you back? At Grand Huron International, you get to choose the coach of your choice anytime from anywhere. Visit grandhuroninternational.com and harness the power of on-demand coaching today.